So thank you for attending the Midtown Ventura Community Council meeting tonight for April 14th, 2022. I'm Gregg Mansfield. I'm the chair of the Midtown Ventura Community Council. As a reminder, we treat all of our guests with dignity and respect. If you have a question for a guest, please put the question in the chat panel and we'll ask it once the speaker is finished with the presentation. The speaker may also ask you to call on you to clarify or follow up with a question. Having done this nearly for 2 years now, we found this kind of to be the most effective way to work. And so I just want to give everybody else as a side note, our board voted last month to return to in-person meetings starting with the June. But don't worry, what we're planning to do is do a hybrid meeting where we're going to stream it and then also be in person. But again, there's a lot of factors at play there. Depends on how the pandemic's doing, but our intent is to have our first in-person meeting again on June 9th. So what I'm going to do is, normally at this time we get the public safety report. I'm going to jump forward to our spotlight on nonprofits, and tonight is the Ventura Fire Foundation. And we have Ventura City Fire Engineer Austin Foulkes, who's also, I think, what did you say, blue tuna fisherman, and is also the vice chair of the foundation. He's here to talk about what they do and how to support Ventura's firefighters. So Austin, please take it away.
All right, well, I appreciate you guys having me here. Like you said, I'm the vice chair of the Ventura Fire Foundation. I currently work for the Ventura City Fire Department, and I've been there for 7 years, and I'm an engineer on the department. So basically I get to drive that big red truck all around town. Best job on earth. So basically what we're here kind of going to talk about is the main mission for the foundation is to enhance lives and provide assistance to firefighters and their families. I mean, our main focus is with our fire community within the city, but we do branch out to our neighboring fire departments, be it Ventura County, Oxnard, Fillmore, the Naval Base, and Fed and State Fire. That all kind of work locally within our county to help with our mission. Whether it's on the job injuries, illnesses, or a mental illness, we kind of help focus on that to try to provide for these firefighters that don't get provided for, whether it's on the job or within their own insurances. So we have like a few main focuses within our foundation. The Benevolent Fund, which is dedicated to the well-being of the fire department family. And it's really just there to assist the family and the firefighters during their greatest needs. An example, a couple years ago, one of our captains came down with ALS. So we did a couple big fundraisers for him. We were able to put a ramp into his house when he was no longer able to be mobile, and really get into some treatments that weren't really covered by his insurance to try to help and alleviate his suffering. The family was very appreciative, and it was a really big endeavor for us and helped us grow as a foundation. One of our new programs we're calling Helping the Helpers. So the biggest cause of death for firefighters is cancer. And so we do a lot on the job to try to alleviate that. But we also, as a foundation, try to educate our firefighters and their families on treatments, and then alleviate any kind of needs that they have when they arise. But the other really sad part about the fire department job is mental stress is a huge effect on our firefighters. And suicide is actually the second leading cause of death among firefighters. So our main focus now is mental health and job-related stress. So that's a big focus of ours now, where we put on already one seminar for our local firefighters and their spouses. And we're looking to continue to do that and bring people in to talk to these, because it is a very stressful job. We're going into houses where we don't know what's going to go on. And we're all paramedics on the Ventura City Fire Department. So every day is something different. And we see everybody in different walks of lives at their lowest point in their life. And we do our best not to take it home with us. And a lot of times that can take a big mental stress at the end of the day on our firefighters. Some of the fun stuff that we do as a foundation is we have a pipes and drums band that's through our foundation. So every St. Patrick's Day, you'll see us going around town playing all throughout downtown Ventura. But this was built because in honor of one of our fallen firefighters, John Duff. He was a captain for Ventura City Fire Department. And when we went to go honor him for his funeral, there was no local pipes and drums band. Up and down the state of California, we tried to get pipes and drums to come and play, and there was not one available in California. So what the Ventura City Fire Department did along with the foundation is all their members, they got together, and a few guys that could somewhat put a beat together, learn how to play the pipes, the bagpipes, which is not a very, I'm learning how to play it right now. It's not a very easy instrument, and the drums. And so now I think we are up to 12 members, and it's a lot of fun. But we raise money, and we kind of do it for our peer support among our group of firefighters, and to honor our fallen firefighters. The other one we do is Team VFD. So what that we do there is we partner with other charitable organizations. We do events like the Seattle Stair Climb, where you go and you climb 76 stories up their tall tower there, and you do it for time. And that one is kind of helps benefit St. Jude's. That's our big one that we do. We do some summer barbecues, some fundraisers, and the like. But we just recently hired Joe Booth as our executive director. So right now you had a bunch of firefighters who didn't really know what they were doing with a 401c and a foundation. And we got a little too big for our britches. So we had to hire somebody to come and help us out. And, it's kind of like with firefighters, kind of like herding cats. So he got us all together, and now we're on a straight and narrow path. But that's kind of the gist of what we do as a foundation and we're just continuing to grow and to help our firefighting community.
Thank you, Austin. Anybody have some questions? Please put in the comments, or you can raise your hand. I can call on you. The one thing, a couple comments where I was wondering, great presentation. So let's start off. Thanks, Austin. Love the pipes and drum band. And that's from Christy Weir. And then Marilyn said, I wonder where they got the bagpipe players for the Neil Andrews funeral. Would you know?
That was before my time at the department. So I'm not quite sure where they would have gotten. There are a couple pipes and drums bands that aren't affiliated with fire departments. There's one big one in Camarillo, so they could have hired them out. Okay. And then also Dan asked if you could put the link, if you can show the link possibly in the chat, that would be great. Okay. And then Marilyn says, thanks for your service. Thank you, Austin. Stellar work, Austin. How can we support you? So in the chat, I'll put our foundation website in there. We're also on Instagram and Facebook under the Ventura Fire Foundation. And both of those will have links on the Instagram and the Facebook to our website, to where you can donate through our website. Great. And then Austin, one question, I know you touched on, but again, you guys support retired and current firefighters, right? That's correct. Yeah. Okay. So great. Well, thank you. I'm not seeing any other comments or questions right now. So thanks for taking some time tonight. I appreciate it. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Austin. Okay, so we are going to right now dovetail back to our public safety report. Commander Bronca, unfortunately, is not able to be with us tonight. He had a family emergency. And Emily Graves, who is the spokesperson for the fire department and also the police department, has graciously agreed to step in. Just she doesn't have any specifics, unfortunately, about the crime report, but she can talk about overall how it works and give us a little bit of a quick update if possible.
Yes, thank you, Greg. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Graves. I am the community outreach specialist for both the police and fire departments here in Ventura. I'm also a Midtown resident, so I'm really excited to be here tonight. I don't have information about recent crime stats for this area of town, but I can briefly touch upon our new 2021 annual report. This is the first time we've brought back the annual report in about 20 years now. So it's really exciting to publish a public document that kind of gives a brief snapshot into police operations, crime reporting, arrest information, calls for service, response times, and just general other community outreach efforts. It'll give you kind of a look into our investigative units, our CSI records, and kind of just overall what we do each year, and kind of a statistical representation of that work. That is now public on our website. I can put that direct link in the chat. venturapd.org is the short URL for that, but I'll give you the direct link. And we really would appreciate it if you guys take some time to read through that. There's a lot of valuable information in there. There's a one-page letter from our chief, and under Chief Schindler, he's been our chief for about 2 years now. We've kind of revamped our mission, vision, and our values, and he really has a great vision moving forward. So please take a look at that.
Thank you, Emily. I think one question I was going to ask you, and I know that you guys, you're in the data statistics. That's every day, every hour occurrence, right, with the police department. So it used to be you would look at the reports year over year, but you guys are always in the weeds as far as data. It's a big part of policing now, isn't it?
It is. So I'm sure you guys are well aware of what is available on the website in terms of updated crime stats, and kind of our staffing hour to hour, day to day. But this is really a look at the year overall. On our website, we do have our online community crime map that gives you updated crime information. It doesn't give specifics to each crime. And then I'm not sure how much Commander Bronk has really gotten into other topics besides updated crime stats for Midtown area, but our staffing levels vary based on peak hours in the city. And so there's a lot of valuable information in there. And yeah, we look at our stats often, and we analyze how we can better staff, better provide service. We do things called enhanced patrol, focus patrol. All those things are based on peak hours of service, and how we can best serve the community.
Great. Well, thank you, Emily. I'd asked people to put some questions in, but unfortunately you were just called into the game a couple minutes ago. So I
don't know how much.
So,
I don't know how much, depending on the question, I know a lot, but I can't speak directly to crime statistics.
But what I will say is we'll have Commander Brunk back here next month, and we'll have him go work with us a little bit more, talk a little bit more in depth about some of the stats and what he sees and what he likes. So thanks for stepping in. I appreciate it.
Of course, happy to be here. This is my first meeting, so it worked out.
Well, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. So, okay, so we're gonna let me go through my notes here. We're gonna keep on moving down. So the next part is our main portion is we have next up is Maria Navarro. She's a policy advocate for Central Coast Unified Sustainable Economy, which is everybody knows is CAUSE. And she will discuss her work on the social, economic, and environmental justice in the region. CAUSE recently released a study on the housing crisis and how it's affecting the health and well-being of the local communities. And she's here tonight to give us some insight in the report. So Maria, I saw you. Will you please take it?
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for hosting me, and Karen for, giving me information as well and giving me that invitation. If you don't mind, I kind of do more housing stuff. I know that we also work environmental issues, but that's more of Lucia Marquez. And if y'all know her, she is our environmental genius, environmental justice genius. But she could come here and give a presentation a little bit more geared towards that. But if you don't mind, today I could give a presentation about housing.
Absolutely not. If that's your wheelhouse, absolutely stay there.
Awesome. I was wondering if I could actually share screen.
Please. Yep, I can do it.
Awesome. But as you all know, housing is a big issue right now, and I think Doug is is he still here? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Doug is probably gonna see this presentation again.
Maria, can you take the screen?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Awesome. So to start off, yeah, so basically what we did in CAUSE is that we've been working on housing for quite a while now. In 2019, we decided to conduct a survey 590 people around this were surveyed in Oxnard, Ventura, Santa Paula, Santa Barbara, and Santa Maria. This following results are just taken from the 121st surveys that we conducted to Ventura tenants. And 81% of them lived in large apartment complexes. The other ones lived in either like fourplexes or different, single family homes or other arrangements. So just a little bit of background, housing, unaffordability timeline. I think the '08 crash was really one of the biggest kind of like transfers of wealth from, people, especially little people, and to kind of like more big players. Thomas Fire also did not help with our vacancy rates. Then COVID pandemic, we're still feeling, the increase of rents and the uncertainty in kind of like rental prices and the rental market as we are recovering from that. And just really quickly, I actually pulled this together yesterday, but basically in the kind of like, we think about these things as, kind of like CPI, and maybe people not being able to keep up with like our wages, not being able to keep up with the increased price of services and of everything. But for example, in the Thousand Oaks, Ventura, and Oxnard region, we see that the EDD reports that, since 2007, so 15 years ago, to now, there has been an increase of approximately 2.7% in our wages. Inflation has gone up actually 2.1% in that period of time, so 2007 to 2021. And then, but the VC Civic Alliance 2021 report reported that actually housing and like rental prices have increased at almost double of inflation and more than double of inflation and almost double of our wages, which is 4.7%. So this is where we see a lot of that hurt and that unaffordability. So no wonder that when we ask, people whether they were cost burdened, so they, if a household spend more than 30% of their income, you'll see that cost burden renters, that's the majority of the Ventura, renters, and there's only 35% comparison of cost burden homeowners. We definitely don't like to see that either, but as you can see, there's a lot of people who are struggling. Interestingly enough, renters with children make up 32% of the population, whereas homeowners with children are only 27% of the population. So it's something that when I was looking through the statistics, I found surprising, because you always think that homeowners would have more children, and renters would be more like single people who are younger. This is just a graphic of the rent spike and special attention to like the last year or so. I believe this was updated until like March or January of like this year, but as you see it, there's also a marked spike. So what happens when tenants receive rent increases? A lot of them cut expenses like food or healthcare. 23% moved to another unit, 23% also got another job, but 5%, right, moved to non-traditional housing, car, etc. And the report for the homelessness, count came in, I think, a little while ago, and there has been a marked increase, a significant increase from last year to this year. So there is a correlation between rental prices going up, and the amount of, I think, unhoused individuals. 9% of tenants were evicted in the past 5 years, and 41% of tenants received an extreme rent increase in the last year. And by extreme, we mean $100 and more. And this was between 2018 and 2019 in the city of Ventura. This is just a little bit more information. These are home prices. This is actually, I pulled these in like February. I'm not sure, I haven't checked Zillow today, but you get studios that are going for $1,600, ADUs that are going for $1,700. And what this is trying to, say is that if you're a retailer or a food server, you really cannot afford these prices by yourself. What are the barriers to finding new houses? So we said they said, a lot of people said that the credit checks and the application fees were the biggest ones. Credit checks are now being used as a way to screen people who may qualify for the housing or others, but they are also using kind of like the metric of, like being able to make 3 times the amount of the rent as being like the threshold. And that's just really, really hard to get at this point, because if we take a look at, the studio example, we'd be having to make, a household would be having to make around $4,000 to be 3 times as much, right? A month. So what kind of state protections have come out of this? Well, the Tenant Protection Act came out in 2019, and it didn't go into effect until January of 2020. And basically it caps rent increases for certain apartments at 5% plus the rate of inflation, or CPI, or 10%, whatever is lowest. And this is important because right now, 2021 to 2022, the rate was 8.75, but inflation right now is 8.75. So we are actually going to see, I think, next year allowable rent increases that will be capped at 10%, which is, $160 a month if you're renting out that little studio, right? That's a lot of money. The new rate will be based on this month's CPI. And they did actually implement a just cause eviction protection and relocation assistance for 1 month's rent. So for example, if the owner needs to make substantial remodels to a unit, or there's an owner move-in, there is kind of like a forgiveness period, like assistance given to the tenant of 1 month. And the ordinance actually protects, the state legislation actually protects small landlords, or people who, landlords who own 4 units or less. And a rent cap at 9%, this is just some numbers showing just how year by year it increases. And I think I made a mistake here, and I always catch it when I'm showing this presentation. I never fix it. This is supposed to be like 45, I believe, or 43, one of the two. But as you can tell, it just eats up, it's compounding, right? Like if you have a rent cap at 9%, the principal just keeps on increasing. So 9% of, X keeps on increasing. And so it's definitely the higher the rent cap, the more you'll feel it later on. So what are the gaps of this tenant protection? Is that, well, the rent cap is just too high for Ventura. Ventura's rental market cannot accommodate, a 10% increase and not expect a lot of evictions and displacements or overcrowding from people. There's no enforcement mechanism, so it kind of leaves tenants to self-report. These protections expire in 2030, and I just honestly don't believe that there will be enough housing production to lower the price naturally. And I think, these protections should be in place until there is some kind of, there's some kind of, I guess, way of knowing that the price of rent is going to come down, or indication that the price of rent is actually decreasing, right? And it sets a low relocation assistance. If I, for example, am evicted out of my home at a no fault, and I am given 1 month of my rent, so I don't have to pay my last month of rent, it still is too low for me to be able to find transitional housing for a little bit, maybe in a hotel or something, and be able to apply for different rentals, and also come up with my first month's rent and my security deposit. Those expenditures are like $4,000 or so, or $5,000 at the least. So the recommendation that we've asked cities, and actually yesterday we did pass a rent stabilization and tenant protection policy or ordinances in Oxnard, is to include a lower rent cap than AB 1482 and to have stronger relocation assistance. When we talked about, this in Oxnard, and let me just stop sharing my screen. Actually, there's that. But when we talked about this in the relocation assistance, what's specifically striking now is that in Ventura on the west side, there is a 12-unit apartment complex that's going through a mass eviction right now. And if, there were an ordinance of relocation assistance, the people who are now struggling have 2 months to pretty much figure out where they're going to live. They would have had at least more money, more time to try to figure out where they were going to relocate. So it does make a difference. It helps people who now feel like they have nowhere else to go. You know, in the last months, what has increased is the rise of inflation, historical rates that we haven't seen since 1980s. And what's not rising is wages, right? And what's really rising is rents too. So that's pretty much it. Well, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Maria. Had to turn off the mute there. Anyways, so our first question that's come up is, as someone who is thinking about renting out an ADU, would you have a recommendation of what to include in a contract to be fair to the renter and provide the best situation for them?
Sure. I am a big fan of, if we're especially contracting out to ADUs, I'm a big fan of ADUs. I think they're one of the best ways we could try to alleviate our housing crisis. Sorry, I'm connecting my computer. But yeah, I think as long as you include in the contract, I would say one of the things that I would recommend first is that the person who is reading your contract and understand the language of the contract. Oftentimes, you know, we find that people, but this is especially in the Avenue, but people who speak Spanish and do not understand English, or are monolingual Spanish speakers, they are given English contracts. And so they, you know, we're put into weird situations. And by way I talk about immigrant children who are, you know, bilingual, and then we're the ones who are, you know, translating to our parents all of this jargon. And so I like to say that one of the first jobs that I ever had was a translator, because I had to translate all the legal documents for my parents and, you know, things like that. So I would definitely encourage that. Secondly, I would put some kind of, I would encourage to have like a longer noticing period if you can, for like rent increases, and also, you know, some kind of like open communication when it comes to like problems between landlord and tenants, that is written into the contract. That way it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. But I think people could, you know, they can, if there's going to be a rent increase or something, they would appreciate more of a heads up, months ahead, right? That you're going to do it, rather than just like doing it the week before or something, or like a month before. I think that's the requirement now.
Okay, Maria, thank you for that answer. Was a good question on that one. The other, Karen asked, according to a report today in the LA Times, the top issues for California voters are affordable housing and homelessness. Can you talk a little bit about how those two are tied in?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, where was I reading this? It was I feel like I heard it in a podcast, so don't take it as the truth, because I think I am not sure where the source was, but I think what we see is that a lot of people put in, when they become homeless, or when they're unhoused, a lot of it comes from them not being able to pay their rent, or unable to, you know, pay their mortgage or some other thing, usually their rent. Then they go into housing with family members, friends, and kind of couch surf a lot of the times. And then after that, when, you know, people just can't sustain them anymore, or something, they become homeless, and either go into cars or other methods of living that are, you know, maybe sheltered or unsheltered homelessness, right? And so the link is not seen. So basically what the person in the podcast was saying was that the link is not seen as one-to-one correlation, right? It's like, when asked, they say, oh, well, my family members and my friends just didn't want me to stay in their house anymore, or they kicked me out. But in reality, it comes from that beginning, either eviction or inability to pay that home in the first place. So there is a correlation there. And I would be more than willing to actually look more into those studies.
And then Dennis Goldstein asked the question, is the shortage of housing driving the prices higher?
Yeah, you betcha. Yeah, the vacancy rate has been low, and it is a shortage of housing. And you know, one of the last slide here, sorry, let me just do that again. You know, how do we address, right, long-term and short-term solutions? Well, really, tenant protections are a short-term solution because they're a Band-Aid, right? They're like basically what is kind of keeping people from being displaced, getting people away from being unhoused and away from being at risk of homelessness, right? Legal protection for tenants, access to educational resources, all of those are short-term goals. But the long-term, really what we have to do is build up the housing stock, and especially affordable housing. Because if we do build our housing stock kind of like how we've done it right now, it just hasn't been enough. And so what we're building now that's new and shiny is actually not affordable. So it has to be a combination of building housing, setting some units aside to be affordable, and then changing our zoning, our permitting, inclusionary housing policies and all of that. So we could tackle this in different angles.
Okay, and I think you touched on his next question was a little bit, is the housing shortage caused by public policies?
Oh, yeah. I think it is. I think one of the main things that has caused our housing shortage is the way we organize our cities. And we've really, really liked the method of kind of like single family, kind of like sprawl. And in terms of sustainability, I think we've seen that it's just not as sustainable. There's too much maintenance that has to happen. There's too much, you know, public infrastructure expenses that we cannot maintain. And so when we really think about how society and how cities used to look like before, they used to be concentrated in how they look like in Europe or nearly everywhere you go in the world today. They used to be centered around the downtown, and then you would have a little bit of the outskirts. Right now, we just, you know, we're car dependent. We have to drive everywhere. It is a really heavy toll on our tax system, but it's also not the best use of land. And I think that that's what's led a lot to this housing shortage, is because we've zoned our way into single family and, you know, low density housing. And I'm not saying that it's bad to really like think and love the idea of a single family home, but to some extent, I think that this is a new idea that was made in the 1940s, 1950s, and that we've embraced, but we haven't really kind of checked ourselves to see if it's actually working.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you so much for coming tonight and speaking. It's not an easy solution, is it? There's a lot of tentacles to this. So actually, you got one last one coming in from Sheree. What is CASA's perspective on increasing the VHBH ordinance?
Yeah, I don't know what the VHBH ordinance is.
Sheree, do you want to clarify it?
Yeah, we're getting an increasing amount of vacation homes by owners and Airbnbs, and like in Ventura, some whole apartment complexes are actually turning into hotels. There's actually one on the avenue already doing that. And so what's CASA's perspective? Do they feel that we should have any kind of ordinance to have a limitation in the neighborhoods? Or especially if it's like not shared homes where you rent a room out in your house, but just homes being bought up for hotels. Has CASA talked about that at all?
Well, we haven't taken a public stand of it, and I can't speak as CASA, but as Maria, I'll tell you that I think that that's a very like, yeah, we should regulate that. I don't think it should be, you know, easy to create these basically short-term rentals that don't really do anything to help our housing stock. That actually depletes usually our rental stock. So it's really hurtful for our community.
Okay, and one other one was, what are the best ways to encourage affordable housing? Given today's cost to build, is it realistic for builders to build affordable dwellings?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. And I think we've depended a lot on our affordable housing developers to, take on a lot of that burden and, be real, power hitters up in the state level and trying to get all those grants to be able to construct affordable housing. But I think that there is, if you all are involved in the inclusionary housing ordinance, is actually one of the ways that we could possibly create more housing when there is a project. That just means that around 10 affordable housing advocates are pushing for 20%, so 20% of the housing being either kind of restricted to low income or moderate income tenants or property owners, depending on what they are. So I think inclusionary is a big one. There's also different methods like CLTs, community land trusts, and different things like that would also be a good idea. But community land trusts and all of that is, I think, a little bit, there has to be more coordination amongst tenants or amongst people in the community.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I hopefully you got a chance to get into the chat. There's a lot of thank you for speaking or coming tonight. So thanks for giving again a part of your night. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you all. Have a good one.
It was nice to meet you. Thank you. Okay, so our final speaker tonight is Ventura City Fire Marshal Brett Reed, who's going to give us a presentation on how to better protect our homes and businesses during the continuing drought by explaining ways to build our defensible space. So Brett, I saw you there earlier. If you can take it away, appreciate it.
All right, thank you for having me. I guess as a former fire engineer, I can confirm that Austin Foulkes does have the best job in the world. And I definitely miss being on the engine and responding. And just want to give a shout out to the great work that the Ventura City Fire Foundation actually does. I mean, they do an incredible job. So props to them. So am I able to share my screen here? Great.
You should be. Let me look. No, you were not. Go ahead, take it.
Okay, let me see if this works here. Okay, how's that? Are you able to see this?
Yep, we can.
Outstanding. All right, well, thank you for having me. So my name's Brett Reed, and I am the acting fire marshal for the City of Ventura. So I guess we'll get that cleared up. And my position is the fire prevention supervisor and currently acting fire marshal for the City of Ventura. I've been with the fire department for a little over 3.5 years, came down from Mammoth Lakes Fire Department. I was with the fire department there for 12 years and lived in the area up there for about 25. So fairly new to the city, fairly new to the fire department. But this has been a blessing for me to be a part of this community and this organization. So as you mentioned, tonight we're going to be talking about our fire hazard reduction program and defensible space, what defensible space is and how it can protect our community and your homes and our firefighters. So the goals of the fire hazard reduction program is to increase firefighter and public safety, improve department ability to defend your property, maintain trees and vegetation that benefit a property, to inspect all 6,200 parcels in our city's very high and high fire severity zones. And I wanted to remind everyone that our brush reduction deadline is May 18th. So a little history of our FHRP program. So pre-Thomas Fire, the department was doing roughly 600 inspections of properties in the very high fire severity zones. They were just focused on the perimeter parcels that were on the outlying areas of the very high fire severity zone. So post Thomas Fire, We continued that trend for a couple of years, and due to increase in public demand, really complaints and questions, and just really the demand that was placed on the fire department to increase our number of inspections, we started inspecting all 6,200 parcels that are in the very high and the high fire severity zones. So this chart kind of shows you, where we're at now compared to where we were just a couple of years ago in terms of the number of inspections. This gives you an idea of where Midtown lies in our fire severity zones. So the red areas indicate the very high fire severity zones. The orange areas indicate the high fire severity zones, and the yellow indicate the moderate. So these zones are designated by CAL FIRE through a program called FRAP, which is the Fire Resource Assessment Program. And we have essentially adopted that map into our city's GIS map. There is an interactive fire hazard severity zone map located at the city's website, cityofventura.ca.gov/FHRP. So as you can see, not all of Midtown is affected by that, but if you don't know if you fall within one of these fire hazard severity zones, please check the interactive map, and you can find that out. And I guess to clarify, we are not inspecting those parcels that are in the yellow, the moderate zones. We are only inspecting the red and the orange. So what is defensible space? Defensible space is an area around the perimeter of a structure that can aid in defending it from wildfire. So there's state requirements, state law, and local ordinance that requires 100 feet of defensible space for those properties that are in the very high and high fire severity zones. Zone 1 is within 30 feet of the structure. Zone 2 covers the remaining 70 feet. So this slide here kind of gives you a good visual representation of what those zones mean. So you've got your home, the structure. Zone 1 is that area within the first 30 feet. The first 5 feet, studies have really shown that the first 5 feet in that zone 1 is really the most crucial. Trying to get as much non-combustible material within that first 5 feet. Then it extends from the 30-foot zone out to the next 70 feet for 100 feet of defensible space, or to the property line. So if your property, if you only have a 5-foot setback on both sides of your property, you're not responsible for 100 feet on either side. You're only responsible to your property line. So zone 1, what the requirements are is you're trimming branches away from the chimney and roof, giving vertical separation between the roof line and any overhanging trees, removing leaves, needles, other vegetation on roofs and gutters, removing dead and dying vegetation near or overhanging buildings, keeping your grasses short, keeping your grasses irrigated, and separating live flammable ground covers and shrubs. So this upper photo gives you a good indication of separation of flammable vegetation, and the lower one kind of indicates how that tree is overhanging the roof and can transfer fire from the hedge to the tree to the structure. And that's really our goal. Zone 2, we start getting into trees and limbing up trees. So what we're trying to do is create separation from the shrubs or vegetation underneath trees creating a vertical separation between the shrubs and the crown of the trees, and creating separation between the trees themselves so that a fire can't transfer in that last photo you saw from the shrub or the hedge to a tree, getting up into the crown and then transferring from that tree to another tree. So zone 1 being the most intense areas of fuels management, and the last 70 feet being less intense of the fuels management. And the photo on the bottom gives you a good indication of limbing up the trees and really eliminating that ladder fuel that can take fire from the ground, from a surface fire, and bring it up into the aerial fuels up into the tree. So good examples of brush management. These homes really are very nicely done, and there's really no problems here. They're nicely maintained. The shrubs are cut back. You can see with this first one that the shrub is not touching the house. The shrubs out in front along the walk are spaced nicely, and then there's just real good management on the next one, using some succulents and spacing and trimming back from the tree from the home. Examples of lack of brush management, these are just poorly maintained properties. And that's really all we're talking about, is maintaining your vegetation. You can see how the vegetation has grown up into the structure. There's vegetation up on the roof, under the eaves, and there's no separation between fuels. It's just a good fuel bed for fire to transfer from one plant or tree onto the structure. Excellent example of before and after brush management. You can see on the left, just poorly maintained, really overgrown, and on the right, it's maintained, and there's separation between the fuels. And I think this is a good indication of what we're asking for, is not completely clearing out all of the vegetation on your property, but just reducing the amount of fuel, creating separation, so that if a fire does get into a hedge or a shrub, that it's not going to transfer to another tree and then get to the structure. Home hardening is a concept that is taking existing structures and improving them to more current construction standards. So new construction standards in the very high and high fire severity zones are much more restrictive than in previous years. So, you've got non-combustible siding, ember resistant eaves, under eave protection, Class A roofs, all for new construction. Home hardening is a concept of taking existing construction and doing what you can to retrofit and give your home a little more protection. There's currently no requirement for home hardening, but it is an excellent way. It's another measure that you can do to really increase the survivability of your home during a wildfire. Studies have really shown that construction standards and defensible space are the two best ways to protect your home from wildfire. So another example of home hardening, you can see the photo on the left kind of has what we refer to as gorilla hair. It's really combustible mulch, and then using a rock mulch on the right hand side. I don't know how I got past that, but trying to reduce the amount of combustible mulch. So this year we are billing for our defensible space inspections. As I said earlier, we've increased from 600 to 6,200. And so it really is a cost recovery method. And so the billing for the first required annual inspection would be billed at $38.97. And each additional inspection, if needed, if we need to come back to do re-inspections, would be billed at just over $60. Non-compliant properties may see a penalty of a citation that would be an administrative citation at $424. All of this information that I just went over is available on our website. We have frequently asked questions. Again, that interactive fire hazard severity zone map, all the resources, the guidelines, essentially the guidelines are a checklist that our inspectors use when they go out that really give you a good idea of what our requirements are and what our inspectors will be looking for. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about our program tonight. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brett. I think our first question has popped up from Kathy Bremer. If you have a 1950s home with some uniquely shaped attic ventilation, and there are no standard retrofit vents that prevent ember entry into the attic, is there a company that makes custom vents?
It's an excellent question. I don't know of specific companies that make custom vents. What I do know is that there are a number of ember resistant vents that are on the market that don't allow ember intrusion. They're specifically designed to eliminate embers getting into the attic vents. And I mean, it's a great point because what really burns most structures is not direct flame impingement, but it's ember intrusion. And so this concept is a concept of home hardening. I'm not aware of a company that would make custom vents, but what you may be able to find I'm trying to think the term of people who just make stuff. You may be able to get somebody to make a vent in town, some kind of contractor or handyman or something. May not be a listed ember resistant vent, but what you would be looking for is about an 1/8 to 1/4 inch mesh screen and I think it's actually been reduced from the 1/4 inch down to a 1/16 or a 1/4 inch mesh. So if you were to, and I see Dan Long, the fire coated wire mesh and the old standard screen like mesh. Absolutely. Yeah. Lowe's would carry that. I think any of the hardware stores would carry that standard screen mesh. And so even just placing that over what your current attic vent is would be hugely beneficial.
Okay, Brett, hopefully we'll get some more questions for you here. One of the questions I want to ask you is, what's the worst plant that I can plant on my property?
The worst plant?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's pretty subjective. But there are, the one for whatever reason, it just really kind of gets me is bougainvillea. and people love bougainvillea because it's beautiful, it blooms. But I've fought bougainvillea fires before. They burn hot, they burn fast, and they just have thorns like you wouldn't believe. And they are extremely difficult to maintain. So, you kind of got a loaded question there, but, it's just my personal vendetta against bougainvillea. I don't know what it is, but probably because I got cut up so bad, trying to fight that bougainvillea fire. But, yeah, there's a lot of different, plants, vegetation that are more flammable than others. And so, really understanding what it is that you're planting, what you have around your house is really the first step. Yeah, juniper, absolutely. Thank you for putting that in there. Juniper's horrible. Those things go up like Roman candles. I see the big kind of standing, they look like cylindrical junipers that people have right next to their homes. And those really make me cringe because it literally is like a Roman candle right next to your home. So I've got,
Yeah. And then Karen asks, is very green avocado trees a low danger, or I'm sorry, I jumped in here. Aren't live oaks pretty resistant to fire?
I believe so. Quite honestly, I don't know much about live oaks, but I think they are. From what I do know about them, I do believe that live oaks are pretty fire resistant.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Brett.
Go ahead. I saw that you saw Mary's question there about a very green avocado.
Yes. Yes.
I would say so. Quite honestly, fruit and citrus trees are ones that we really haven't, I guess, been very restrictive on, as far as where you can plant them and the likes. So personally, I don't have much of a problem with avocado trees, citrus trees, etc.
Okay. Any other questions? The last chance on that one. Christy has said live oaks are fire resistant, and so are healthy pepper trees.
Beautiful. That's good to know.
So, okay. Any other questions? And then Brett, I know you don't work on the arson side here, but we had a big fire over on Thompson Boulevard today. Did you have to work it at all?
I did not have to work it. No.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't have much information on it.
So, okay, perfect. And then Eric says healthy is the operative word in regards to pepper trees. He also hates bougainvilleas. So just to let you know, a fellow guy. And
I'm glad I'm not the only one there.
That's true. And then the great presentation. So
thank you.
Thanks so much for speaking. I appreciate it. And if, I'm going to take back the screen from you if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Hopefully it'll come back to me. So, okay. So hopefully we're coming back here. Yes. Hopefully, let me ask you again to get it back. So if you pull out your share.
Oh, here we go. Let me stop share. There you go.
There you go. You got it. Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Again, thanks, Brett.
Thank you very much.
Nice meeting you tonight. So, and then, okay, so now we come to the announcement portion of our meeting. And I think Doug Halter is traveling right now, but he's on here. Do you have any comments or anything you'd like to bring up?
Hey, Greg, it's great to hear everybody. I'm sorry I can't have my camera on right now, but I wanted to first just say that as not just a council member, but as a landscaper, Christy's absolutely right. It's a lot of the plants that have a lot of high oil content is really dangerous in a landscape formation. The issue that I think that we have a lot of is we don't really have a lot of houses that have 100-foot property lines. So doing what you can up to your property line is what's really important. and making sure you don't have ways that fire can go up on top of the house or crawl up the side, or trees that overhang. Citrus trees actually seem to be a buffer because they're one of the cleanest orchards that you can have. Avocados, I want to just stress that avocados tend to want to have leaves. It's mulch underneath the tree. It tends to like that. So that could be considered a fire hazard. That's the side note. Now, as your council member, I want to share that a lot's been going on, as you can see, either on council or in the newspapers, what have you. And I could say a couple things. One is that, as you know, we did redistrict, and I wanted to stress the fact that I am so honored and thankful to be a council member in the great city of Ventura, and to have been elected by all of you in Midtown. And unfortunately, every 10 years, our districts will move. They will change. That's just going to be the nature of districting. And our district, when it was first formed 4 years or 3 to 4 years ago, it was really cognizant. A lot of attention was put on having up to 3 council members that represented the downtown, since the downtown was really the cultural center, the heart of the city. And now in Midtown, you're going to have 2 council members that represent what we call Midtown. What's my district, District 2, will be spanning the hillsides. There was a lot of different parameters we had to consider in what the district makeup was. But I want to also stress the fact that while we vote by district, every council member has the onus to make the best decisions on behalf of our entire city. And I will always represent the entire city of Ventura. So that's one thing. The next thing is I wanted to stress that there's been stuff in the paper about the Brown Act violation. We went to Washington, D.C. And I got to tell you, it's unfortunate, and it's something that I guess the best we could do is apologize at this point. But the reality of the matter, what I can share with you is that there's a National League of Cities conference in DC. And see, the Brown Act affects local agencies, local councils, committees, commissions. And conferences are excluded from the Brown Act. The Brown Act basically means that you can't have a majority of one council or committee in attendance without noticing that it was a public meeting. Well, conferences are excluded from that, from the Brown Act. The unfortunate situation is upon going to DC, and keep in mind that we only recently just reopened up City Hall. So a lot of us that were elected 15, 16 months ago have only seen each other in person probably 5 times now. Okay. When we went back to DC, there was meetings set up by the city's lobbyists to meet with our Congress members to thank them, because last summer we applied for a $2.8 million grant for the WaterWise program, or the Water Pure program, sorry. And actually, while we were back in DC, Biden signed the bill that granted us that $2.8 million. So we want to make sure that the Congress members were appreciated, and that we thank them for what we hope is the first of many grants to come our way. I will say there's more money than we probably have ever seen in our lifetimes coming out of Washington, D.C. at this point in time. And the key was really to thank our council member or our Congress members, and to meet contacts at the conferences, at the conference, and to look at the infrastructure bills and see what on our capital improvement project list could possibly be help funded by the federal government. So in all honesty, while there's always the perception of a Brown Act violation, and then this real Brown Act violation, which means the meetings with the lobbyists were definitely a violation. And for that, I apologize as a council member. But I want to share with you that information. I think there's also transcripts that we're trying to put together to make sure people know what transpired. There's no decisions that were made. It was really about education. And making our elected officials aware of Ventura and our needs as stated in our general plan and in our capital improvement plan. So there you have that part. And then other issues. We're working on budgeting next week. On Tuesday is the next meeting for the general plan task force. So please attend that at 6 p.m. next Tuesday. I hope you're all still there.
No,
Great to hear.
we're here. We're
Okay,
holding on.
all right. I'm about in Salinas right now.
No,
but-
I understand. If you can't see us, you're
Okay.
kind of wondering, does anybody say
Okay,
anything?
sorry. But anyways, I want to make sure that please attend the general plan update meeting or general plan meeting on 6 p.m. next Tuesday. I forget what number this is. It's 13 or 14. We spent time at council reviewing the vision statement. That vision statement will continue to be refined and better represent Ventura, because I know a lot of you have had very good input to help continue to refine it. But I think the foundation of it is good. We just need to continue to tweak it through this process. So there's more I could report on, but I probably already took more time than you wanted me to. Great. So I'd like to pass it back and open it up to any questions.
Okay, Doug. Hey, thank you. Yeah, if anybody does have some questions, it's a great opportunity to hit Doug up on it. So just Christy had just a quick comment about speaking of trees. She said some of the new Midtown Commons ficus trees are not staked and are getting very crooked and leaning. Is there any way to get them staked?
Oh, is that a question? I'm sorry.
I think it is, or a comment. I don't know. A little bit
Yeah,
of
I
both.
think, I bet, I'll be happy to research that. Is that from Christy or?
Yeah, Christy asked
I'll
that
be happy
one.
to look into that when I'm back on Monday and see if I could ask Parks and Recs to see what they could do to help stake those, because having a straight, healthy tree is definitely, it starts at the very beginning when we first put them in the ground. So we've got to make sure of that. So definitely let us know if we see trees like that need that type of protection.
Okay, well, thank you, Doug. And then Patty and Glenn Overby asked, can you elaborate on why 5 council members and city manager all had to go to Washington in light of the financial issues? Couldn't you go and report back?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that for a second. First off is that keep in mind that not most of us, I know from my standpoint, it's quite a burden to take 3 days away from my business, my customers, my civic duties in the city of Ventura. But given the fact that we're applying for millions of dollars of grants from the federal government, and for the first time in a long time, we have lobbyists that the city of Ventura is paying to help look out for those grants for us. And for the I'll be 62 tomorrow. And in my lifetime, I have never seen so much funding coming from the federal government down to local agencies. So I feel that of my 15 months or so, 16 months on the council, the best 3 days, the most productive 3 days I had was going to DC and making contacts, getting to know other people from other cities, getting to know the lobbyists that we could call and ask questions as new issues arise. And whether it's about homelessness, lack of affordability, transportation, fire resiliency, underground and utilities, parking issues and how other cities handle it, to things like Main Street moves, which by the way got extended till to June 30th, 2024. It was a very, very productive time in DC. And I know the city manager and city staff wanted all 7 council members to go. It would have been a first, so that we could have the best representation we can to actually outreach and learn as much as we can to bring it back to Ventura. So I think it was really well spent money. It was a minimal amount of money to go back there. The most important thing for me is that the commitment to time. It was 3 days. It was 3 days of my week to go back there and do that on behalf of our city. And again, it's $2.8 million was that we secured starting back in July, and actually became real when we went back there. That's the first of what we hope to be many grants towards the water project in particular. So yeah, I think it was a very important and wise move for us to have as many council members go back there as possible.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And because you can't read necessarily the chat comments, Dennis Goldstein says, I think it supports the professionalism of our city council members. And Dan Long added time well spent. So, hey, Doug, thanks for joining us. I appreciate hanging on, especially at that drive up the 101. At least you're not in the traffic. So just
no, it's been beautiful. Thank you. You guys, they keep up all the good work. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. Now this portion, do our board members have any comments or anything they'd like to bring up, or any current events? Seeming pretty quiet.
Seeing none.
Yeah, and then, okay, so I'll take it to the last step. Any community members have any comments or anything before we sign off? I think everybody's satisfied tonight. So with that, we'll call it a night, I think. And so,
Greg,
yes.
yeah, you had mentioned that we're going to try to do a hybrid meeting in June, and we'll see how that goes, see if we can get it together. But we are still probably going to do what you didn't say. I think we still are planning to do virtual meetings, but try to do like quarterly in-person meetings. At least see how that goes for a while.
Yes, and just so everybody know that we voted on this last month as a board, we discussed the same thing, and I think we get a lot more engagement and people are willing to pop in on a Zoom meeting as opposed to getting dressed and getting in the car and then driving down. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll play it by ear. So again, thank you tonight for being here. Our next meeting is coming up. Does anybody know when our next meeting is coming up here? I got the wrong date on this one.
May 12th.
May 12th. Thank you, Dan. I have my June date down. So anyway, so again, thanks everybody. I appreciate it, and have a good night.